when you say standard, what does it mean?
Mm-hmm.
When you say silver standard, gold standard, again, with the basic question.
The term really, I think, was based out of gold. The first time this came out was the gold standard, because so I said gold was money at the end of the 19th century, but it wasn't just that everybody was using gold coins and trading with gold coins, because that's got a problem of divisibility. So a lot of things are worth less than one gold coin. So how do you buy that thing? And the answer was that you created monetary instruments that were backed by gold. And so currencies, national currencies under the gold standard, were specific units of gold. And that's how a gold standard functioned. Money was gold, but you had pieces of paper that were redeemable in gold. So you could go to the central bank, you could give them the piece of paper, the $100 bill or the $10 bill, and they'll give you gold in exchange. And they give you a specific quantity of gold in exchange. Effectively, the paper was just a receipt for gold.
So the paper exactly represented the amount of gold.
Exactly, that was the plan, or that was what it's supposed to do. But arguably, we never had a pure gold standard, because the nature of gold means that the people who are in charge of the gold, they have an enormous amount of power, because the gold is concentrated with them. And as long as not everybody shows up at the same time asking for their gold, then you can make more receipts than you have gold. And
sure.
This is
so there's always shady stuff going on, but at least that's the stated goal, is the receipts should exactly represent the amount of gold there. And also when you say standard, it means that governments sort of publicly stated that this is the main way of making transactions that are monetary. So this is the money. This is the official money that you should be using if you live in this country.
Yes, although I would say it's more like the other way around. It's not that the governments established gold as money. It's more like gold gave the governments the credibility for their currencies. Sure. So governments were not the ones that made gold money. Gold has been money before states were invented. States, if you have a government and you'd like to have some legitimacy and you'd like to be able to deal with other governments on an equal footing, you had to go by the gold standard. You had to have a currency that was redeemable in gold, so that you could trade with the rest of the world, so that people could, in your country, use that currency. So it's not that governments were choosing gold. It's more like they were having to adapt their own currencies to gold in order to give their currencies credibility.
So there's a dance there, though, because if they had to, then why did they switch away from it after? So there is a dance where the governments, the people pressure. So first of all, the basic characteristics of the hard money pressures the governments and the people in terms of what should be used. Then the people, based on their community, the network effects, the way the narratives they tell each other, all that kind of stuff, they pressure the governments to take on a particular money. Then the governments, they like power, they like control, all those kinds of things. They pressure the people and tell different kinds of narratives. So there's a dance going on in this evolution of what technology to use for a monetary system. So the reason I don't know if governments had to, because they clearly didn't have to, because they eventually moved away from it. But there was pressure probably.
Yeah, but I mean, even after they moved away from it, central banks until today, they still hold a lot of gold reserves. In fact, if you look at 1914, when the world really went off the gold standard, the amount of gold reserves held by central banks was a tiny fraction of what it was. As time went on, central banks accumulated more and more gold. What ended up happening is they prevented their citizens from using the gold, but they continued to use it. So gold continued to be money up until 1971, because effectively the world was on a dollar standard and the dollars were backed by gold. But then after 1971, even then, central banks continued to accumulate gold, because why would you as a central bank want to accumulate pieces of paper effectively, or credit liabilities of another central bank that can produce them infinitely? And it's a lesson that's becoming more and more obvious to governments today, as we see U.S. sanctions taking, say, Russian reserves or Afghanistani reserves. And this is why, we see China and Russia have accumulated a lot of gold over the last 10, 20 years.
So just to return to the question of definitions. So, what is hard money versus soft money?
Yes. So hard, I mean, it's a relative thing, but the hardness refers to the difficulty of producing more units of the money supply. So an easy money would be a money that is relatively easy to make. So you can increase the supply by 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% or something like that. So pretty much all commodities, all market commodities other than gold and silver, they're easy money and they're not suitable as a monetary medium because they're being consumed. So if you look at, in the Bitcoin standard, I mentioned this metric called the stock to flow ratio, which is the ratio of the annual production, the flow, to the stockpile, the existing stockpiles. If you look at all the other metals, they're easy money because they're being consumed. So think about how much stockpiles of copper there are in the world today. So copper companies obviously have some stockpiles of copper. Major copper consumers will have stockpiles of copper, but the vast majority of copper is essentially on a conveyor belt of production from the mine straight to the consumer good that it's being used for. So the existing stockpiles are roughly in the range of 1 year's production. If you take all of the companies, I don't have exact statistics. It's very difficult to get these, but it's roughly in the same range. Like if copper production were to stop completely today, we'll have about a year's production stored in various places. So that makes copper terrible money, because if you started using copper as money, and this is why, a lot of people say, well, money is a collective illusion. Money is a social construct. If we all agree that something is money, then something is money. I think this is completely clueless. And it's usually Marxists who believe this. So obviously no understanding of economics. It's completely clueless, because even if everybody in society decided we wanted to make copper as money, even if we all decided to collectively take part in this hallucination or illusion, it would not make copper money. It would just make everybody who decides to take part in this hallucination poor. That's it. It would make copper miners rich. It would make all of the people who chose copper as money poor, and copper would not be money. It can't work, because what happens is, because of the fact that the stockpiles are so small, if you buy, even if you get the 1,000 richest people in the world, all of the world's billionaires, they get together and they all dump all of the money that they have, all the stocks, all the bonds, all the gold, all of the Bitcoin, everything that they own, they dump it and they buy copper with it. What's going to happen? Price of copper is going to go up a lot. But what's going to stop copper miners from flooding the market with even more copper than what the billionaires bought? Nothing. They're going to dump all of that extra copper production. If the price of copper is going to go up, so there will be a lot more copper mining than all the other metals. A lot of nickel companies and gold miners are going to switch to focusing on copper, and then we're going to dump an enormous amount of copper on the market. The value of copper is going to crash, and the people who you chose copper as money are just going to end up with large warehouses of very cheap rusting metal.